The javelin pierced Aidan Reed's side with a sickening thud. He staggered forward, vision blurring, as blood soaked his tattered uniform. Behind him, the blue-skinned hunters closed in, their vertical pupils narrowing in the dying light. He had nowhere left to run. "I am not your enemy!" he shouted in their language, the words still foreign on his tongue despite months of practice. The lead hunter, adorned with bone trophies and ritual scarification, raised his spear for the killing blow. "Sky demons bring only death," he snarled, his melodic voice at odds with the hatred in his eyes. As the spear descended, a brilliant flash of azure light erupted between them. The hunters recoiled, shielding their eyes, as a feminine figure materialized in the clearing. "Enough!" she commanded, her blue skin glowing with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with authority. "This human is under my protection." The hunters hesitated, weapons still raised. "Supervisor Nix," the leader acknowledged reluctantly. "This off-worlder trespassed on sacred hunting grounds. The Council's decree." "The Council answers to me in matters concerning the human," she interrupted. "Leave us." The hunters retreated into the silver-leafed forest, disappearing like ghosts among the twisted trunks. Only when they were gone did Aidan allow himself to collapse, pain overwhelming his adrenaline. Asera Nix knelt beside him, her turquoise eyes assessing his wound with clinical precision. "The toxin spreads quickly," she murmured, pressing a cool blue hand against his fevered skin. "Why did you leave the compound, Aidan Reed? You're not ready for this world." "Had to see the sky," he gasped as she applied pressure to his wound. "Real sky. Not through viewports. Your curiosity may kill you yet," she sighed, producing a small pouch from her garments. "This will hurt." Before he could respond, she packed the wound with a pungent herb mixture that burned like fire. Aidan's vision swam, memories flooding back unbidden, the experimental FTL drive test, the blinding light as reality tore around the Prometheus, and then, darkness. 30 years of darkness. "Careful, human," Asera whispered as consciousness slipped away from him. "You've been in a coma for over 30 years. I cannot lose you now." Aidan awoke to the familiar pearlescent ceiling of his recovery chamber, the geometric patterns pulsing with a soft blue glow. The pain in his side had dulled to a manageable ache, but the memory of the hunter's hatred remained sharp. "The patient regains consciousness," announced the melodic voice of the medical chamber's monitoring system. "Vital signs stabilizing. Notifying Supervisor Nix." Aidan struggled to sit up, wincing as his wound protested. The chamber was a peculiar blend of the alien and familiar, furniture shaped for human proportions but crafted from materials no Earth designer would recognize, technology that seemed both primitive and impossibly advanced. The door slid open, and Asera entered, her blue skin luminescent in the chamber's soft lighting. Her snow-white hair was pulled back in an intricate braid, the symbol of her house, a crescent moon with 3 stars, prominently displayed on her forehead. "You continue to test the limits of human resilience," she observed, checking the readings on a crystal display that materialized above her wrist. "The Vrokha hunters use a neurotoxin on their weapons that would kill most beings. You merely slept for 2 days. Lucky me," Aidan managed, his voice rough. "Is that concern I detect, Supervisor?" "Professional interest," she corrected, though the darkening of her cheeks suggested otherwise. "Your physiological adaptations continue to surprise our researchers." Since awakening from his 30-year coma 3 months ago, Aidan had become something of a scientific marvel to the Zuran medical community. The lone survivor of the Prometheus disaster, his body had undergone subtle but significant changes during his extended cryostasis. "The Council is displeased," Asera continued, adjusting something on her display that sent a cooling sensation through Aidan's wound. "They granted you restricted movement privileges within the compound. Not permission to explore the wilderness. I didn't exactly plan to meet the local welcoming committee," Aidan countered. I just needed to feel real ground under my feet, breathe unfiltered air. After 30 years of nothing. He trailed off, the weight of lost time pressing down on him. 30 years. Everyone he'd known on Earth would have moved on, aged, perhaps died. The world he remembered would exist only in history records now. Asara's expression softened. I understand the confinement is difficult. But the Vroka tribe views your kind with particular hostility. The legends of sky demons who bring destruction are deeply ingrained in their culture. Not without reason. Aiden muttered, memories of the Prometheus mission flickering through his mind. What we encountered out there, what we brought back. We should not discuss this here. Asara interrupted, glancing meaningfully at the chamber's monitoring system. Your medical status has improved sufficiently for transfer to more comfortable quarters. Perhaps there we can speak more freely. Aiden understood her caution. Since regaining consciousness, he'd realized that his presence on the Zuran medical station was politically complicated. Some factions viewed him as a valuable source of information, others considered him a dangerous anomaly best eliminated. Asara had positioned herself as his protector, though her true motives remained unclear. When can I leave? He asked. Now, if you feel strong enough to walk, she replied, offering her hand. I've arranged private accommodation in the diplomatic wing. The Council can hardly object to following proper protocols for an extraterrestrial visitor. As Aiden took her hand, he was again struck by the strange warmth of her skin. Zurans ran hotter than humans, another biological curiosity in a galaxy full of them. He stood cautiously, testing his balance. Lead the way, Supervisor. They traversed the sweeping corridors of the Celestial Harmony Station, an architectural marvel that blended organic forms with crystalline structures. Through massive viewports, Aiden could see the curve of the blue-green planet below, Earth, but not as he remembered it. 30 years had brought visible changes even from orbit, new coastal configurations, different weather patterns, expanded orbital infrastructure. Other Zurans they passed regarded Aiden with a mixture of curiosity, caution, and occasional hostility. His status as the only human aboard a station of thousands created an inevitable spotlight. Your species has advanced considerably since your accident, Asara commented as they walked. The diplomatic relationship between Earth and Lyra is still evolving, but cultural exchanges have been productive. Your arts, particularly music, have become quite popular among younger Zurans. Hard to imagine Earth music appealing to people who can communicate in harmonics. Aiden remarked, remembering how Zuran's speech sometimes contained layers of meaning through subtle tonal variations. Perhaps that's precisely why, Asara suggested. Different approaches to pattern and rhythm. The unfamiliar becomes fascinating when it reveals unexpected commonalities. They reached a section of the station marked with diplomatic insignias from various worlds. Asara led him to spacious quarters that, while clearly designed with alien aesthetics, contained furnishings more suited to human physiology than his previous accommodations. These are the chambers reserved for the Earth ambassador during official visits, she explained. Currently unoccupied, as Ambassador Chin is attending conferences planetside. The doors sealed behind them with a soft chime. Asara immediately moved to a control panel and made several adjustments. Privacy protocols engaged, she said, her formal demeanor shifting subtly. We can speak freely now, Aiden. He lowered himself carefully onto a seating platform, the wound in his side still tender. About time. I've been getting pretty tired of watching every word since I woke up in this place. Asara took a seat opposite him, her posture still perfect but somehow less rigid. The official narrative about your rescue remains incomplete. The Prometheus was discovered adrift 3 weeks ago, that much is true. But what the Earth authorities don't know is that my people found your ship 5 years ago in deep space. This wasn't entirely news to Aiden. He'd suspected from fragments of overheard conversations that there was more to his miraculous recovery than the public story suggested. Why keep me hidden for 5 years? You weren't hidden, you were studied. Asera corrected. Your cryostasis pod was functioning but deteriorating. We transferred you to our medical facilities while examining the Prometheus. And what did you find? Aiden asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Asara's bioluminescent patterns dimmed slightly, a sign of concern or caution. The ship's hull was covered in markings unlike any language in our databases. The drive system had been modified with technology that shouldn't have been possible for Earth's science of that era. And the rest of my crew? Long dead, she said gently. Only you survived, protected by the experimental cryopod. The others. She hesitated. Their remains showed extensive cellular reorganization, as if something had attempted to rewrite their very structure. The memories came in flashes, Captain Loring screaming as her skin rippled with impossible geometries, Dr. Novak dissolving into patterns of light before reconstructing as something no longer human, the entity's vast consciousness brushing against Aiden's mind, curious and coldly alien. It wanted to understand us, Aiden said hoarsely. Physical existence. Biological processes. Consciousness housed in matter. Concepts completely foreign to it. What was it? Asera asked, leaning forward. The entity you encountered when the drive malfunctioned? We never knew what to call it. Some of the science team thought of it as a higher dimensional being. Others believed it was something from outside our universe entirely, observing through thin places in reality. Aiden rubbed his temples. Whatever it was, it offered in exchange our understanding of physical existence for its knowledge of something beyond physics as we know it. And your captain agreed to this exchange? Aiden laughed bitterly. We were explorers, scientists. The opportunity was too incredible to pass up. The entity linked with our ship's computer, downloading everything: human history, biology, culture, technology. Then it began uploading its knowledge. That's when the crew began to change. Asera surmised. The data was incompatible with our reality. It wasn't just information, it was transformative. Reality itself warped around anyone who processed it directly. Aiden's voice grew distant. I was in engineering when it happened. When the system started failing, I initiated emergency protocols and reached a cryopod. The last thing I remember is the ship's AI activating the emergency jump back to our dimension. Asera was silent for a long moment, processing his account. The Council suspects you carry some of this entity's knowledge in your mind. That's why they've been reluctant to return you to Earth authorities. What do you mean? Your brain activity during cryostasis showed unusual patterns, similar to the data streams recorded by your ship's sensors during the encounter. As if your mind was slowly processing information that would have overwhelmed your crewmates instantly. The implications chilled Aiden. You're saying part of the entity is in my head? Not the entity itself, but some of its knowledge. She clarified. The human brain is remarkably adaptive. Your extended time in cryostasis may have allowed your mind to gradually integrate what would have been immediately fatal otherwise. Before Aiden could respond, the station's alert system activated, a soft but insistent tone that made Asara's head snap up in alarm. That's a proximity warning, she said, moving quickly to the communication terminal. Something's approaching the station. The display showed a small craft on an intercept course, unmarked, its design unfamiliar even to Asera judging by her confused expression. Not one of yours? Aiden asked. No, she replied, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls. And it's not responding to identification requests. The craft accelerated suddenly, its trajectory leaving no doubt about its intentions. Impact klaxons blared throughout the station. It's going to ram us, Asera exclaimed. We need to get to the emergency shelters. They barely made it into the corridor when the first impact rocked the station. Aiden stumbled against the wall, his wound screaming in protest. Emergency lighting activated as primary systems fluctuated. This way, Asera urged, supporting him as they moved toward the evacuation point. Around them, Zuran crew members rushed in organized patterns, their emergency training evident in their coordinated response. A second impact, more violent than the first, sent them both sprawling. The whole breach alarms intensified. Section 12 is compromised, the station's AI announced calmly. All personnel evacuate to inner rings immediately. That's the docking section, Asera said, helping Aiden to his feet. They're not trying to destroy the station, they're boarding it. Who? Aiden demanded. Who would attack a medical facility? Asara's expression darkened. Someone who knows what you carry in your mind, Aiden Reed. Someone who wants the entity's knowledge. They changed direction, heading away from the designated evacuation routes. When Aiden questioned this, Asara's explanation was grim. Standard protocols would funnel us towards central gathering points, easy targets. We need to reach my private research laboratory. There's equipment that we can use. Weapons? Aiden asked hopefully. Information, she corrected. And yes, some defensive tools. The Council doesn't approve of my contingency planning, but they'll appreciate it now. They navigated through increasingly chaotic sections of the station. Twice they had to detour around sealed bulkheads, and once they hid as armed intruders passed, humanoid but not human, their features concealed behind environmental suits that revealed nothing of their nature. When they finally reached Asara's laboratory, she sealed the doors with security protocols that seemed far more extensive than standard medical research would require. You've been preparing for something like this, Aiden observed as she activated systems around the lab. The Prometheus wasn't the first ship to encounter interdimensional anomalies, she replied, retrieving what looked like primitive weapons from a concealed compartment. A short spear that hummed with energy at its tip, and what resembled a bow with crystalline arrows. My family has studied the ancient texts about such entities for generations. When I saw the markings on your ship, I knew the legends were true. She handed him the bow. This operates on principles your people might call arcane, but it's simply technology tuned to specific energy frequencies. It will be effective against our visitors. You know who they are? Aiden asked, examining the weapon. Despite its primitive appearance, he could feel subtle vibrations suggesting advanced mechanisms within its structure. The Void Walkers, Asera said grimly. A cult that worships the spaces between dimensions. They believe beings like your entity are gods who will elevate their followers beyond physical form. And they want what's in my head. They want to finish what began on the Prometheus, she confirmed. To open a stable connection to the entity's domain. A crash against the laboratory doors interrupted their conversation. The reinforced barriers shuddered but held. They've found us, Asera said, readying her spear. Aiden, listen carefully. If they capture you, they'll extract the information directly, a process you wouldn't survive. I can get you to an escape pod, but you'll need to reach the surface and find my contact in the northern mountains. I'm not leaving you to face them alone, Aiden protested. This isn't negotiable, she replied, her tone softening despite her firm words. What you carry is too important to fall into their hands. And, she hesitated, I've invested too much in keeping you alive to lose you now. The doors shuddered again, stress fractures appearing in their structure. We don't have much time, Asera continued, moving to a side panel that concealed another passage. This maintenance shaft leads directly to the emergency launch bay. Take this. She pressed a small crystal into his palm. It contains coordinates and recognition codes. My contact will know you by this. Your contact has a name? Aiden asked, securing the crystal and the bow. Malar, Asera replied. She's unconventional by Zuran standards. An exile who chose to live among the planet's wilderness. But she knows more about the ancient texts than anyone, even the Council. The doors began to glow red at the edges as the attackers applied some kind of cutting tool. Go! Asera urged, physically pushing him toward the passage. Find Malar. Understand what you carry before they use it to tear reality apart. Aiden hesitated, then acted on impulse, pulling Asera into a brief but intense kiss. Her skin flushed a deeper blue with surprise and something more complex. That's not standard procedure for patient transfer, she murmured when they separated. Consider it a human cultural exchange, Aiden replied with a grim smile. Stay alive, supervisor. I'll find this Malar and figure out what's happening in my head. The entity changed you, Aiden Reed, Asera said as he prepared to enter the passage. Not just your mind but your very cells. You'll discover this world affects you differently than you expect. Trust your instincts. With those cryptic words and the sound of the laboratory doors beginning to fail, Aiden slipped into the maintenance shaft and began his descent toward the emergency launch bay, the crystal clutched tightly in his hand and the alien bow strapped across his back. Whatever the entity had done to him, whatever knowledge lurked in the recesses of his mind, one thing was certain: his 30-year sleep was over, and the waking world had become far stranger and more dangerous than the one he'd left behind. The escape pod plummeted through the atmosphere, its heat shield glowing orange as friction superheated the surrounding air. Inside, Aiden braced himself against the restraints, the crystal Asera had given him clutched tightly in his palm. The small craft shuddered violently as it hit a layer of turbulence. Warning, guidance systems compromised, announced the pod's AI in a calm voice that belied the seriousness of the situation. Manual control recommended. Of course, Aiden muttered, releasing his restraints to access the pilot controls. His military training had included emergency reentry procedures, but that had been 30 years and one interdimensional encounter ago. The control interface was Zuran, but intuitive enough for him to recognize the essential functions. He disengaged the damaged auto-guidance and took manual control, adjusting the pod's descent angle to reduce the atmospheric friction. The violent shaking subsided somewhat. Through the viewport, he could see the planet's surface approaching, vast forests of silver-leaf trees, winding rivers that glinted like mercury in the light of the setting sun, and in the distance, the jagged peaks of the northern mountains where Malar supposedly lived. Proximity alert, the AI warned. Unidentified craft on intercept course. Aiden's heart sank as he checked the rear sensors. A sleek vessel was following his descent path, its design matching the attack craft that had breached the celestial harmony. The Void Walkers had pursued him. Can this thing go any faster? He asked the AI. Maximum velocity already exceeded. Structural integrity at 64% and declining. Not ideal. Aiden scanned the terrain ahead, looking for options. The mountains were still too distant to reach before his pursuers caught up, but a dense forest region lay directly in his path. If he could land there, the canopy might provide cover long enough for him to disappear. He adjusted course, aiming for the thickest part of the forest. The pod's structure groaned in protest as he pushed its maneuvering thrusters beyond their intended capacity. Structural integrity at 47%. The AI updated. Catastrophic failure imminent. Just a little longer, Aiden urged the failing craft, watching as the tree line rushed toward him. The pursuing vessel fired something, energy weapons that sizzled past the pod, narrowly missing. At the last possible moment, Aiden deployed the emergency braking system. The pod slowed dramatically, but not enough to prevent a bone-jarring impact as it crashed through the upper canopy of the forest. Branches and trunks shattered against the hull, each impact further compromising the already damaged structure. When the pod finally came to rest, half buried in the soft forest floor, Aiden was barely conscious. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and his recently healed wound had reopened, soaking his side with fresh crimson. Structural integrity at 12%. The AI informed him, its voice distorting as systems failed. Emergency, recommend, immediate. The AI went silent as the pod's power systems gave out. Through the cracked viewport, Aiden could see daylight rapidly fading as the planet's sun set. Soon he would be in darkness, injured, in an alien forest, with hostile cultists searching for him. Not exactly how I planned my return to active duty, he muttered to himself, forcing his body to move despite the pain. The pod's hatch was jammed, but a section of the hull had been peeled back in the crash, creating an opening just large enough for him to squeeze through. He gathered what few supplies remained intact: a medkit, a water purifier, the bow Sarah had given him, and most importantly, the crystal containing his link to Malar. As he pulled himself from the wreckage, the distinctive sound of engines overhead confirmed his fears. The Void Walkers had tracked his descent and were circling the crash site. Night was falling rapidly, but it might not be enough to conceal him once they deployed ground searchers. Clutching his side to slow the bleeding, Aiden limped into the deepening shadows of the alien forest. The silver-leaf trees loomed above him, their trunks twisted into shapes no Earth forest would produce. Strange bioluminescent fungi provided ghostly illumination as darkness fell completely. He needed to put distance between himself and the crash site, find water, treat his wounds, and somehow figure out how to locate Malar in a mountain range on an alien world. All while evading cultists who wanted to extract forbidden knowledge from his brain. One step at a time, he reminded himself, an old mantra from his military days. He walked until his legs threatened to give out, using the unfamiliar stars as a navigation guide to maintain a course toward the northern mountains. When he could go no further, he found shelter beneath the massive roots of a fallen tree, its interior partially hollowed by some native life form. Using the medkit, he cleaned and dressed his wounds as best he could. The bleeding had slowed, but infection was a serious concern in an alien environment. He had no idea what microbes might exist in this ecosystem, or how they might interact with his human physiology. Or his not entirely human physiology, if Asara's comments about cellular changes were accurate. As he rested, Aiden examined the crystal she had given him. In the darkness, it emitted a faint glow that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. When he held it in his palm and concentrated, he felt a strange resonance, as if the crystal were responding to his thoughts. "Guess we'll figure you out tomorrow," he murmured, securing the crystal inside his tattered uniform. Despite his exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. His dreams were fragmented, filled with images that seemed both memory and something else. Stars unlike any in human space, vast geometries that defied comprehension, and the entity itself, ancient and curious and utterly alien. He awoke before dawn, drenched in cold sweat but with a clarity that hadn't been present before. The forest around him seemed somehow more defined, its patterns more evident. When he checked his wounds, he was shocked to find them significantly improved. The gash on his forehead had closed completely, and the deeper wound in his side, while still painful, showed signs of accelerated healing. "You'll discover this world affects you differently than you expect," Asara had said. Perhaps this was what she meant. With renewed determination, Aiden continued his journey as the alien sun rose, casting the silver forest in shades of purple and gold. He found a stream with water that his purifier deemed safe, and refilled his dwindling supply. Small creatures, something like a cross between fish and amphibians, darted away as his shadow fell across the water's surface. By midday, he had reached the edge of the forest. Before him stretched an open plain of knee-high, rust-colored vegetation that swayed in patterns that didn't quite match the wind. Beyond that, the northern mountains rose like sentinels against the horizon. Crossing the open ground would make him vulnerable, but there was no alternative route. He waited until the sun began to dip toward the western horizon, hoping the lengthening shadows would provide some cover. He was halfway across the plain when he heard it, the unmistakable hum of anti-gravity engines. Dropping flat among the rust-colored plants, Aiden watched as a Void Walker search vessel moved methodically across the landscape, scanning patterns visible as it swept the ground with invisible sensors. They were being thorough, which meant they were committed to finding him. Whatever knowledge he carried from the entity, they wanted it badly enough to mount a sustained search on a planetary surface. No small undertaking. The vessel passed close enough that Aiden could see figures moving within its transparent canopy, humanoid but definitely not human, with elongated limbs and features obscured by environmental suits. Were they simply protecting themselves from an unfamiliar atmosphere, or was there something more to their concealment? When the craft finally moved beyond his position, continuing its search pattern toward the east, Aiden resumed his journey with greater urgency. If they were searching this far from the crash site, they must have some method of tracking him. Perhaps the changes to his physiology left some detectable signature. The mountains grew larger as he approached, their lower slopes covered in vegetation unlike either the silver forest or the rust-colored plain. These plants were more reminiscent of Earth flora, perhaps not coincidentally, given Asara's mention of Malar living as an exile among the planet's wilderness. Had she chosen an environment more accommodating to non-Zuran life? As twilight deepened, Aiden found himself at the base of the mountains. Sheer cliffs rose before him, with no obvious path upward. He studied the terrain, looking for any sign of habitation or passage. The crystal in his pocket suddenly grew warm. When he removed it, its pulsing had intensified, and the glow had shifted from white to a deep blue that matched Asara's skin. Acting on instinct, Aiden held the crystal up toward the cliff face. As he moved it slowly from left to right, the pulsing changed rhythm, growing faster in one particular direction. A guidance system, then, pointing him towards something. He followed the crystal's guidance, which led him to what appeared to be a solid rock wall covered in hanging vines. But when he pushed the vegetation aside, he discovered a narrow fissure just wide enough for a person to slip through. The crystal pulsed rapidly now, confirming he was on the right path. Securing the bough across his back, Aiden squeezed into the fissure, which opened into a hidden path that wound upward through the mountain. As he climbed, the last light faded from the sky, but the path was illuminated by the same bioluminescent fungi he had seen in the forest, clearly cultivated here to mark the route. Someone maintained this hidden way. After nearly an hour of climbing, the path leveled out and widened into a small plateau. Ahead, built into the mountainside itself, stood a dwelling that blended Zuran architectural elements with adaptations to the natural landscape. Warm light spilled from windows made of some crystalline material, and smoke rose from a chimney carved from the living rock. Before Aiden could approach, the dwelling's door opened. A figure emerged, clearly Zuran from the blue skin and white hair, but unlike any he had seen on the celestial harmony. This Zuran was ancient, her face lined with age, her movements deliberate but strong. She wore simple garments made from local materials rather than the synthetic fabrics preferred in Zuran society. "So," she called out in perfect, unaccented English, "Asara finally sends me a sky child to study. Come closer, Aiden Reed. Let me see what the void has made of you." Aiden stepped into the light spilling from the dwelling. "You're Malar?" The elderly Zuran laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "I am many things. Exile. Heretic. Keeper of forbidden knowledge. But yes, to Asara Nix, I am Malar, her mother's mother, and the reason she understands more about the spaces between worlds than any other Zuran scientist." She gestured toward the open door. "Come inside, human who is no longer entirely human. We have much to discuss before the Voidwalkers find this place, and find it they will, now that you have led them to our mountains." Malar's dwelling was a strange blend of primitive comfort and sophisticated technology disguised as simple tools. What appeared to be a cooking fire in the central hearth actually burned with a precision that suggested molecular control. Pottery vessels on wooden shelves contained substances that hummed with contained energy, and the walls themselves were inscribed with equations and diagrams that Aiden recognized from his dreams, mathematical representations of concepts beyond conventional physics. Asera said you might provide answers, Aiden said as the elderly Zuran prepared a steaming beverage that smelled like cinnamon and ozone. About what happened to me. About what I'm carrying in my head. Answers, Malar repeated thoughtfully, handing him a rough-hewn cup. Such a simple word for such complex things. Drink. It will help your body process the changes more efficiently. Aiden hesitated, then took a sip. The liquid tasted better than it smelled, sweet and invigorating, sending a pleasant warmth through his limbs. The entity you encountered exists in a state we might call interdimensional, Malar began, settling across from him. Not belonging to any single reality but aware of many. Such beings have observed our universe since its formation, occasionally interacting when curiosity overcomes caution. It was definitely curious, Aiden agreed. It wanted to understand physical existence. Because it has none, Malar nodded. At least, not in any way we comprehend. Imagine consciousness without matter, thought without brain, existence without location. That is what you touched at the edge of our reality. She gestured to the equations on her walls. My ancestors encountered such an entity thousands of years ago, when Zuran civilization was still young. The experience nearly destroyed us. Most records were purged, but some, my family's records, were preserved in secret. And the Void Walkers? Aiden asked. Who are they? Malar's expression darkened. Fanatics who discovered fragments of the truth and twisted it to serve their desires. They believe interdimensional beings can grant them transcendence, evolution beyond physical form. They seek to open permanent connections to the spaces between realities. Which would be bad, I'm guessing. Catastrophic, she confirmed. Reality itself would unravel around such breaches. What happened to your crew would happen on a planetary scale. Aiden set down his cup, suddenly less enthusiastic about the strange beverage. And they think I can help them do this? Because of what's in my head. Your mind contains patterns imprinted by direct contact with an interdimensional entity. Knowledge that would destroy most beings but was somehow integrated into your consciousness during cryostasis. The Void Walkers believe this makes you a perfect conduit for their communion. Perfect for them, less so for me, Aiden observed dryly. How do I get this knowledge out of my head? Malar studied him with ancient eyes. You don't. It's part of you now, changing you in ways we're only beginning to understand. Your accelerated healing. Your increased sensitivity to energy patterns. Even your dreams are no longer entirely your own. She stood and moved to a cabinet. Retrieving what appeared to be primitive versions of the weapons Asera had given him, a bow and a short spear. These were created by my ancestors after their encounter, she explained. They harness frequencies that can disrupt interdimensional energies. Against ordinary opponents, they function as simple weapons. Against the Void Walkers or their masters. She left the implication hanging. You're giving these to me? You'll need protection, she said simply. The Void Walkers won't stop hunting you. And there are others who would exploit what you carry, including some within the Zuran Council who see military applications in interdimensional research. What about Asera? Aiden asked, concern edging his voice. Is she safe? Malar's expression softened. My granddaughter has always been resourceful. She will have escaped the celestial harmony before the Void Walkers took control. Most likely she is already working to secure alternative transport to this world. She's coming here? Of course. She has invested too much in you to abandon her research now. Malar's eyes twinkled with something like mischief. Among other investments of a more personal nature, perhaps? Aiden felt his face warm, remembering the impulsive kiss before their separation. We're not, it's not. At my age, one recognizes certain patterns, Malar said with amusement. Interdimensional entities are not the only connections that transcend expected boundaries. Before Aiden could formulate a response to this observation, a low, resonant tone filled the dwelling, some kind of alarm. Mailer's amusement vanished instantly. They'd found us sooner than expected, she said, moving quickly to a viewing portal that showed the night sky above the mountains. Voidwalker craft, at least 3. They must have tracked your energy signature more effectively than I anticipated. We need to evacuate, Aiden said, military training kicking in as he gathered the weapons. Is there another exit? A hidden path down the mountain? There are many paths, Malar confirmed. But fleeing is not our best option. The Void Walkers have technology that can track your unique signature across considerable distances. We must instead deny them what they seek. How? You said the knowledge can't be removed from my mind. It cannot, she agreed. But it can be stabilized, integrated more fully so that it no longer broadcasts its presence like a beacon. I had hoped for more time to prepare you, but circumstances force acceleration. She moved to the central hearth, adjusting the strange fire until it burned with a blue-white intensity. From a concealed compartment in the floor, she retrieved a crystalline vessel containing a swirling liquid that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible, its colors shifting in ways that hurt Aiden's eyes. This substance is derived from the same elements that compose the entity's domain, Malar explained. My ancestors learned to synthesize it at great cost. It allows for controlled interaction with interdimensional energies. And you want me to what, drink it? Aiden asked incredulously. In a manner of speaking, Malar replied. The substance must be introduced to your system while your mind focuses on the knowledge imprinted by the entity. The combination will either stabilize the patterns or complete the transformation that began aboard the Prometheus, she said gravely. Your consciousness would expand beyond physical constraints. Your body would become a vessel for something no longer entirely human. Outside, the sound of approaching craft grew louder. They had minutes at most before the Voidwalkers would begin their assault on the dwelling. Not much of a choice, Aiden noted grimly. There rarely is, when dealing with forces beyond conventional reality, Malar agreed. But consider this, if you succeed, you gain control over the knowledge rather than being controlled by it. You become something new, something that might stand against the Voidwalkers and their masters. And if I fail? Malar handed him the crystalline vessel. Then I will ensure nothing remains for the Voidwalkers to exploit. The threat, or promise, was clear. Aiden took the vessel, its contents moving in response to his touch as if alive and aware. What do I do? Drink, Malar instructed, taking up her own weapon, a staff that hummed with contained energy. And remember who you are, Aiden Reed. Hold to your humanity even as you embrace what lies beyond it. Outside, the whine of engines stopped. The Voidwalker craft had landed. Soon they would breach the dwelling. Aiden raised the vessel to his lips. The liquid had no taste, but as it passed down his throat, he felt an immediate reaction, as if every cell in his body were suddenly awakening to new possibilities. His vision blurred, then sharpened to preternatural clarity. The equations on Malar's walls no longer seemed like abstract symbols but obvious truths, as fundamental as gravity. And the knowledge that had lurked in the recesses of his mind since the Prometheus incident rushed forward, no longer fragmented dreams but a coherent understanding of realities beyond the conventional 3 dimensions. He saw the universe as the entity had seen it, a complex tapestry of interwoven dimensions, each with its own physical laws, all part of a greater whole. His body felt simultaneously weightless and impossibly dense, as if he existed in multiple states at once. Through the dwelling's walls, he could perceive the Voidwalkers approaching, humanoid forms but containing something else, something parasitic that twisted their natural structures toward its own purpose. They're possessed, Aiden gasped, the realization striking him with perfect clarity. The Voidwalkers, they're hosts for fragments of another entity. Not the one I encountered, but something similar. Something hungry. Yes, Malar confirmed, watching him with keen interest. An interdimensional parasite that feeds on consciousness, using its hosts to find new vectors for expansion. It has hunted our reality for millennia. The dwelling shuddered as something struck its outer walls. The assault had begun. Malar raised her staff, and energy flowed through the structure, temporarily reinforcing it against the attack. We cannot hold them long, she warned. The integration must complete quickly if we are to survive. Aiden closed his eyes, focusing on the knowledge flooding through him, trying to direct its flow rather than being swept away by it. He felt his awareness expanding, encompassing the dwelling, the mountain, the approaching void walkers with their parasitic passengers. And beyond them, approaching rapidly from the east, another presence, familiar yet changed. Acera, piloting a craft that resonated with the same frequencies as Malar's weapons. She had escaped the station and was coming to their aid. The dwelling's entrance exploded inward as the void walkers breached the defenses. 3 figures entered, humanoid but wrong, their movements jerky and uncoordinated as if their bodies were poorly fitted suits operated by inexperienced pilots. Through their environmental helmets, Aiden could see not faces but swirling vortices of energy where features should be. "The vessel awakens," one of them said, its voice a discordant harmony of multiple tones. "Perfect for our ascension." Malar stepped between them and Aiden, her staff raised. "You shall not have him, parasites. Return to the void that spawned you." "Old One," another void walker hissed. "Your bloodline has interfered with our hunting for too long. Your end comes now." They raised weapons, devices that appeared to bend light around them in unnatural ways. But before they could fire, Aiden felt something click into place within his mind, the knowledge fully integrating with his consciousness, no longer foreign but a natural extension of his understanding. With that integration came power. He raised his hand, and reality rippled around it. The Voidwalkers' weapons distorted, their energies turning inward upon their wielders. The parasitic entities within the Voidwalkers writhed in sudden agony, their carefully maintained connection to this reality disrupted by frequencies they couldn't counter. "Impossible!" one of them snarled through its deteriorating host. "No human vessel can channel such power without transformation." "I'm not exactly standard-issue human anymore," Aiden replied, standing beside Malar with newfound confidence. He could feel the entity's knowledge flowing through him, but it no longer threatened to overwhelm his identity. Instead, it had become a tool, one he was only beginning to understand how to use. The Void Walkers backed away, their hosts' bodies beginning to destabilize as the parasitic entities lost control of the physical forms they had hijacked. Outside, a new sound joined the chaos, Asara's craft, landing beside the Void Walker vessels. Moments later, she appeared at the shattered entrance, wielding a weapon similar to Malar's staff but more refined, more focused. "Grandmother," she acknowledged with a quick nod to Malar. "Aiden," she added, her eyes widening as she took in his transformed presence. "You've completed the integration." "Just in time, it seems," he replied, feeling a surge of relief and something deeper at seeing her alive and unharmed. The 3 of them faced the faltering Voidwalkers, who now huddled together as if drawing strength from proximity. "This vessel is lost to us," one of them declared, its voice becoming increasingly inhuman as its control slipped. "But others will come. The hunger cannot be denied. The breach will be opened." "Not today," Aiden said, reaching out with his newly integrated abilities to grasp the interdimensional frequencies that allowed the parasites to maintain their presence in physical reality. "And not through me." With a gesture that felt as natural as breathing, he severed those frequencies. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Void Walkers convulsed as the parasitic entities were forcibly ejected from their hosts, their energy forms briefly visible as writhing, many-limbed shadows before dissipating into the void between dimensions. The hosts, 3 different alien species, Aiden now realized, collapsed to the floor, unconscious but alive, their bodies finally their own again after who knew how long under parasitic control. Impressive, Malar observed, lowering her staff. You've maintained conscious direction of interdimensional energy without surrendering your identity. Few have ever achieved such balance. It wasn't just me, Aiden admitted, feeling suddenly exhausted as the immediate danger passed. The entity that affected me was different from these parasites. It wanted to understand, not consume. That difference made this possible. Asera moved to his side, supporting him as fatigue threatened to buckle his knees. The integration taxes physical resources severely, she explained. You'll need rest and nourishment to stabilize your condition. Her touch felt like an anchor, keeping him grounded in physical reality, as his expanded awareness threatened to drift into dimensions where human consciousness was never meant to venture. The Void Walkers will send more of their kind once they realize what's happened, Malar warned, already working to secure the dwelling's breached entrance. And the Zuran Council will have detected the interdimensional energies we've unleashed here. They'll send investigators. We can't stay, Asera agreed. My craft has supplies and defensive capabilities, but we need a more secure location to complete Aiden's transition and determine our next steps. The ancient refuge, Malar suggested. In the southern hemisphere, where the first encounter occurred. The natural formations there help conceal interdimensional activities. Aiden tried to focus on their planning, but his perception kept shifting between conventional reality and the expanded awareness granted by the integrated knowledge. He could see connections and patterns invisible to normal human senses, the intricate weave of energies that composed physical matter, the subtle resonances between similar consciousness patterns, the thin places in reality where dimensions brushed against each other. Aiden, Asara's voice pulled him back, her concern evident in both her tone and the shifting patterns of her bioluminescence. Stay with us. Focus on my voice, on physical sensation. He concentrated on the feel of her hand on his arm, the solid floor beneath his feet, the sound of her breathing. Gradually, his perception stabilized. I'm here, he assured her. It's just a lot to process. We should move quickly, Malar urged, gathering essential supplies and the ancient weapons. The parasites may have been banished, but their vessels can communicate with others of their kind. More will come, and soon. What about them? Aiden asked, gesturing to the unconscious former hosts. They're victims, Asera said. Once the parasitic influence is removed, most hosts have no memory of their actions under control. They'll be disoriented, confused, and free for the first time in possibly years. We'll leave them supplies and directions to the nearest settlement, Malar decided. What they do with their newfound freedom is their choice. As they prepared to depart, Aiden felt a strange resonance from one of the ancient weapons, the bow Malar had given him. It seemed to hum in harmony with his transformed awareness, its seemingly primitive form concealing mechanisms that operated on principles he was only beginning to comprehend. This isn't just a weapon, is it? He asked Malar, examining the bow with his enhanced perception. It's a key, the elderly Zuran replied cryptically. My ancestors created pairs of such instruments, one to open pathways between dimensions, one to close them. The Void Walkers have sought them for generations, believing they could use them to bring their parasitic masters fully into our reality. And now I'm carrying one, Aiden observed. No pressure there. You're carrying more than that, Malar said with unexpected gentleness. You're carrying hope, Aiden Reed. Hope that the knowledge of the void can be used for protection rather than destruction. Hope that different forms of consciousness can coexist without one consuming the other. Asera returned from securing her craft for their departure. We're ready, she announced. Grandmother, are you certain you won't join us? Malar shook her head, smiling sadly. My place is here, maintaining the old knowledge, preparing for what comes next. The Council tolerates my exile because they believe me isolated and powerless. That illusion serves us better than my visible involvement. She embraced Asera with genuine affection, then turned to Aiden. Your journey is just beginning, Sky Child. The integration you've achieved is remarkable, but incomplete. In the days ahead, you'll face choices that will determine whether the entity's knowledge becomes a bridge between realities or a weapon that tears them apart. No pressure, Aiden repeated wryly. Malar laughed, the sound like wind chimes again. Pressure creates diamonds, as your people say. And you, Aiden Reed, have the potential to become something far more precious. A consciousness that spans worlds, a mind that understands what most can never comprehend. She placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. But remember, it is your humanity that makes this integration possible. Hold to it, even as you expand beyond it. With those parting words and supplies hastily gathered, Aiden and Asera left Malar's dwelling for the waiting craft. The night sky above was brilliant with stars, stars that Aiden now perceived not just as distant suns but as multidimensional anchors in a vast cosmic tapestry. As they prepared for departure, Aiden looked back at the mountains where he had begun to understand the profound changes wrought upon him by his encounter with the entity. 30 years in cryostasis, followed by an awakening into a reality far stranger and more complex than the one he had left behind. Careful, human, Asera had warned when he first regained consciousness. You've been in a coma for over 30 years. What she hadn't said, what perhaps she hadn't fully understood then, was that he would awaken not just to a changed world, but as a changed being. Neither fully human nor something other, but a bridge between realities that had never before connected. As their craft rose into the night sky, leaving the mountains and the approaching Void Walker reinforcements behind, Aiden felt something he hadn't expected: anticipation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, mastering his new abilities, confronting the parasitic entities, navigating the complex politics of both human and Zuran societies, he would face them with expanded awareness and unexpected allies. Where to now? He asked Asera as she piloted them toward the southern horizon. She glanced at him, her turquoise eyes reflecting starlight. To understand what you've become. To prepare for what comes next. To find a path between worlds that doesn't end in destruction. Just another day at the office, then, he quipped, feeling more like himself despite the extraordinary changes he had undergone. Asara's lips curved in a smile that transformed her already striking features. There is no office for what we do now, Aiden Reed. We move between established structures, between understood realities. We walk the void and remain ourselves. As their craft accelerated southward, leaving the hunting grounds of the Void Walkers behind, Aiden felt the integrated knowledge settling more comfortably within his consciousness. The entity that had reached across dimensions to touch the Prometheus had forever changed him, but it hadn't erased who he was. Careful, human, he murmured to himself, watching the alien landscape rush by below. The waking world is stranger than your dreams ever were.